think the state had good intentions when they did this. They wanted sort of a uniform approach to it around the state. You know, some cities you could anchor in their waters or counties for 72 hours, some were 7 days, and they wanted consistency. So the unintended consequence was that it really negated our ability to regulate anything. And you can't address some of these issues that have cropped up since then. When I started the Marine Unit for the PD in 2010, the legislation had just gone through, and we didn't have really any of these types of complaints. There was one vessel anchored with some regularity in Mandalay Channel, and then it stayed there for extended periods, and that was the kind of the extent of it. So I found some archived GIS aerials that were kind of interesting, pre and post, and looking at Mandalay Channel specifically because of the proximity to residential areas. So boat breaks loose out there, it's going to collide with something. It's not going to end up on a spoil island, it's going to hit a bridge, it's going to hit a dock, it's going to hit someone's seawall, one of our structures, and so on. So that's a focal point, and you know, back in 2009, I had an aerial and I would have brought them, but they're hard to see this way, with one vessel there, and now there's 30. So we've really recognized that as one of our most significant issues. If you drive Edgewater, they're up in Dunedin. If you go South County, they're all over the place. And what happened was, a lot of folks said, well, why am I paying $500 a month to store this thing when I can take an engine block or an old anchor and just store it out here? That's a piece of the problem, and FWC has a long-term investigation into long-term storage. That's still going on. I don't know when the studies do. But then you have, everyone seems to have what they call a side hustle these days. They're running Airbnbs, they're renting boats, they're bareboat chartering, and some of them are renting as low-income housing, if you will. And it creates a lot of problems because, you know, those boats aren't moving. Are they coming to the pump out? Absolutely not. But to enforce that is exceptionally difficult. PD's done a really good job of staying on top of it and have been issuing quite a few citations for the violations that are available. No anchor lights, vessels that are inoperable or not navigable. And they have a process that we established here in the city. It's an internal process. We have the ability to afford them due process. We expect notifications if the vessel becomes derelict or in danger of becoming derelict. And we have a process that the case can be heard here locally, and we make a determination that we can remove the vessel. We did this because it expedites the process, because if you get in the state system, I don't know if any of you have driven across Courtney Campbell, there's a boat that says derelict and it's marked FWC. It can take many, many months to remove, and it's a funding
just
thing.
At the end of the beach there.
Yeah, it's a funding thing as well. Right. So that one is on the Courtney Campbell Causeway on the south side if you're going eastbound. Right. It's been there a while. They had one in Tampa, and it was over a year that it was up off of the Howard Franklin, a 60-foot sport fish up in the grass flats. So what we did is try and kind of mirror that process, but do it locally. The downside of that is it's very expensive. These things run from $5 to $8 grand to get rid of, just an average vessel. We've got one sunk off the end of Turner Street right now, and same kind of situation. We stickered it and we're moving forward. The other piece of that that's challenging is there's one contractor for the whole county, and its availability. So it's a constant battle. You can see them after any given storm. The anchors are dragged, and they're in some kind of compromised situation. So what we did is approach this from a different angle. Not that it's an end-all be-all, but it's another lever to pull. For Mandalay Channel specifically, state statute changed about a year and a half ago, 21, 22, to allow you to establish anchoring limitation areas, ALAs. You can't anchor in it for more than 45 days. There's some time tables involved, and you can regulate those. And the unfortunate part is, although the state provided that authority, they didn't provide it to municipalities, only the county can regulate it. So we had to meet with the county and ask them if they would consider it. So they have our proposed area, and they're evaluating that. Let me see if I can get this one up there. So,
oh my.
interestingly, this is the proposed area. And Nicole, if you don't mind, zoom in, and you can actually see the fleet of vessels underlying that.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
And you can really see the extent of it. But the county's evaluating that. It's not, it's just another lever to pull. It's something. So we're working through that to see if it's something that we can move forward with the county's support.
How would you track the 45 days?
So we would set up a system where PD could go out and evaluate the vessel, take a GPS location, take pictures. They already track each one of them, so we know,
Okay.
We have a file on each vessel out there. So when they do sink, I don't have to send a diver down to get the FL numbers. They know. The problem is some of these people have gotten creative. The registered owner is not the real owner, or they sold it, 3 times over and no one re-registered the vessel. So finding owners is difficult. Some of them who are trying to run these unscrupulous businesses have even created LLCs for some of these vessels and have registered them under the LLC. So it's a constant battle. It's not unique to Clearwater by any means. I just wanted to kind of bring you and the public up to speed on what it is and what we're dealing with. As a matter of fact, I got a call yesterday afternoon and some photos of one of our fleet. Everyone was excited that it departed. It's aground on Sand Key. So we're dealing with that today. And unfortunately...
On the inside or the outside?
It's the outside. It's on the beach. It's between
gosh.
Sheridan and the park, which is our jurisdiction. So PD was out there trying to deal with it. They got, towboat involved. Luckily, at least for now, the owner is engaging with us and trying to support the removal. So that's a good. So it may have been sold and then someone responsible is trying and they kind of ran afoul of the weather or something. But needless to say, just an example of the challenge with these things. Mm-hmm. So, that's really where we are with it. We're going to continue to work with PD and effectively, monitor the situation, cite where we can, and, remove where we can. But it's an expensive proposition, and there's, if you go the state route, you're subject to that process, which is much more lengthy. And some of them, my view is that if they're on the bottom, you shouldn't have to wait for it to wallow around on the grass slats or break loose and damage someone or have someone hit it. It's just a real challenge. So it's going to be ongoing. Council's aware. I communicated that to them, talked to them about this ALA, and one of the council members has a particular interest in it. So it's something we're on top of. It's just a real big challenge for us. Until the state changes the statute and gives us some level of authority back, I think we're going to continue to have this problem. And we've even seen several vessels came from the hurricane damaged areas in Southwest Florida that were bought as salvage insurance very inexpensively, and then they show up here because someone thinks they're going to rehab them, rebuild them, rent them. There's all kinds of schemes out there, but you can see the proliferation. So, if you have any questions about it, certainly online, offline, I'm always, if you see one or someone calls you about one, just call me, and we usually have very good information on it.
I had made note of that one that's my side of town over the Causeway, and I'm 1.5 miles from there. And I had just noticed that, and I hadn't seen it before, but I realized I really hadn't been to Tampa in a while, which is, I would have seen it right away. So I made note of it, and apparently I'm not notifying anyone. I thought I saw markings on it, so I figured you knew.
And that's why
about
they do it, and that's why we do it, is you mark it so that people don't repetitively call, there's a boat overturned, there's a boat overturned. Because, you definitely want to address an emergency, and if a boat just overturned. So
Yes.
with all those transits today, they were getting lots of calls, so there's spray paint at the bottom of it.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
We can move on, I guess, to our old business items, the first of which is the beach marina update.
Yeah, this is really some good stuff here. We just got notice this week that the FDE permit, all 130 pages, is here. So that's good. You know, as you know, we had to get the federal channel vacated out there, which was the U.S. Congress and the President took care of that issue on our behalf. And then that allowed us to proceed with the remainder of the permitting. So that's really good news. That was an uncertainty that could have really created a timetable problem for this project. I will tell you that the big challenge now is cost. Quite frankly, during COVID, I don't think anyone built any big marinas, and the supply chain problems being what they were and still are, I think it's very difficult to look at a window and say, what would a comparable marina cost now? So what we did is met with our design team and the construction manager at risk, and we've had several meetings, multiple meetings with both teams. And we have the layout is as you've seen it previously. That hasn't changed to date. And we're moving forward to try and get an earlier guaranteed maximum price to see where we are in terms of the budget and, you know, what kind of council action may be necessary and finance action may be necessary to move the project forward. We've got tremendous support from council. You know, my last direction was to do it right. We knew that we had a 70-year-old seawall out there that wasn't part of the scope of the project. We had to add that because it made no sense to come back in 5 years after we've done all this work, millions and millions and dredging, and then replace the seawall, you know, 5 years later. Just made no sense because it's very disruptive out there, as you might suspect. Council also authorized us to pursue, investigate a potential parking garage out there. That solves a couple problems for me. We know that none of the overwater structures are permissible at that marina. The storage, the ice machines, the little offices, the sales kiosks. We've addressed the sales kiosks with the input of the commercial fleet, and those are part of the scope of the project. What we can't account for is the storage necessary to support these operations. You know, years ago they worked out of box trucks, then under umbrellas. So things have progressed, but none of that's permissible in today's code. So what we've done is, as part of the parking garage, number one, it will address the parking shortages we have out there, but it gives us about 6,000 square feet of ground level storage that can be available to our folks. So it would certainly be behind this project, but it solves a problem we had no solution for because you can't build in the floodplain. The only permissible thing is storage, and if you integrate it into an existing structure, then you can use the first floor for that purpose. You can't have any businesses down there. The stuff we have currently in the marina building is ground level, non-permissible going forward. So, we'll see how that tracks. I saw a pro forma for it. They're working through that, and that's been turned over to the parking division, and they are shepherding that project forward. But we made sure that our design team was engaged in those conversations to try and address the needs of our commercial tenants. So, I've got my fingers crossed on that one. It's a promising project from a financial perspective from what I've seen. It's just a matter of how that dovetails with the marina project. So the marina project is moving along regardless of that, but it's an important piece in my view to resolve some of the issues we're going to have without storage and ice machines and all those things. So we'll see how that plays into it. The thing that we have to be mindful of is that there is no mechanism to retain the recreational fleet during the construction. It's impossible. So what I did is, I mentioned in the previous meeting, started a newsletter back in January, and monthly we send updates out and timetables out. So we're looking at probably the end of the first quarter, beginning the second quarter of 2024 to proceed with this project. So I'm trying to telegraph as much as possible to our recreational fleet that, you're going to have to find alternate berthing during the course of this project. And we're putting them on, as they depart, they are put on the wait list to return, and they have priority to return if they wish to. That's really the only way to handle it. I mean, this is, everything's gone, include the seawalls, and the only thing we're going to do is phase it so that the commercial fleet can still operate, because those folks make a living out of there, and that's been a commitment we've made to them since the onset, is that we will maintain the commercial fleet's capacity to do business. It's not going to look the same. We're going to have to shuffle them around and move things around as the construction progresses, but it's something that we're committed to. So exciting stuff is moving down the tracks. The commercial fleet, again, timber docks along the bulkhead, seawall, and then floating structure or floating docks for the fuel dock and transient dock. The remainder of the recreational fleet will all be floating concrete or floating aluminum or a combination thereof. So we're working through those, and that's when the cost comes in, and we have to evaluate all those things. Pursuing grant funding for the transient docks, which is the far eastern dock that will be in there. And the good thing about it is the harbor has a operating agreement with FTEP and FWC that doesn't allow liveaboards. Their definition of liveaboard would impact our transient bookings at the beach, because some of them will come and stay for 30 days or so. We can't allow that at the harbor marina because of the operating permit and the grant. So because of those two things, we don't allow long-term transient stays there. We have them at the beach marina, and if we were to lose the ability to have those long-term transients, it's $150,000 a year and potential lost revenue for that. So that being said, we met with the team. We came up with applications that allowed for liveaboards, what the state calls a liveaboard, what we would have as a long-term transient. We will have no liveaboards, permanent residences at our marinas. We don't allow that. But for someone who wanted to come to stay for a month, 2 months, we would provide for that. The thing we had to do is put a pump out that would service those liveaboard slips or long-term transient slips. So that allowed us to pursue it, and it also allowed us to pursue the grant. So it's kind of the best of both worlds. If the grant gets approved, it's probably $1.2 million to $1.3 million for that piece, which is great. Looking at some other grant opportunities as well, some resiliency grants that may be available, and because I'm going back with a floating system, it allows that sea level rise resiliency over the decades, and that was maybe a good fit for an application for a resiliency grant there. So some good stuff. It's just a lot of work working through the grants and working with the city's grant coordinator. So that's really where we are, looking at, like I said, the last part of the first quarter or the second quarter of 24 to start working through this thing.
I'm sorry, do you have a question?
You had several, but go ahead.
The dredging, there were core samples done. Are there results on those core samples of how the dredging is going to have to be handled?
Yeah, so they've done sampling, and ultimately there's contamination there, so you can't just pump that dredge material elsewhere. You have to truck it away and dispose of it. So that's an expensive component as well. And the marina's been there for so long that you're going to have, and you're just going to have that level of contamination in the sea bottom that they have to remove it, and they can't use it for fill or anything else. So that's part of the project, the challenges related to the project. And I've got to step back. I keep saying 24. We're looking at 25 for the beginning. So sorry about that.
I'm sorry, first quarter, second quarter,
Yeah.
25?
Yeah, so we're about a year out. I keep forgetting where we are in terms of timetable. So we're looking at about a year out or a little more. So
I'm not sure, I guess the tenants understand that. I know several of them.
Let me look at my notes. I may be.
So first of all, while you're looking at it from a positive standpoint, they appreciate the newsletter, I know, and
I'm sorry, 24.
it is 24.
Stand by 24.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
That's what I thought. Yeah, so they appreciate the newsletter and the communication so far, so hopefully they'll
Yeah, and the newsletter's been
continue.
correct.
The parking garage, is that still contemplated for the east end of the lot?
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's the east end of the lot. It can't interfere with our underground fuel tanks out there, so there's some
Yeah.
logistics issues there that we have to account for. Have to account for delivery trucks and things like that need to go under it or around it. So
Right.
they have to kind of figure out. And we felt that it needed to be in proximity to the docks so that storage would be viable and accessible. So that's a piece of it as well.
At some point in time when you move the fuel dock, how long do you think the fuel dock will be out of service?
So we're not sure on the timetables. We're not exactly there yet on the phasing. I don't know. But we do have a plan to contract with the service to be able to fuel from trucks.
Oh, okay.
So we're going to have, and that's what I've been very sort of candid about. We know we're going to have operating revenue challenges, cash flow challenges, because we're going to eliminate the recreational fleet income and we're going to eliminate the fuel income, or at least curtail that. When that's going to occur, we just had budget meetings last week. We can't predict exactly when that's going to occur because the recreational fleet could all say we're leaving tomorrow, or they could wait till the very end. But we know that this thing will take about 18 months to construct. So it's going to be a period of time where we will have to use reserves to cover our operating, we believe, just because of the lost revenue from recreational fleet rent, transient fleet, or transient guest rent, and fuel sales.
And lastly, I was just wondering, with respect to the kiosks, do the commercial operators pay for the construction of the new kiosks? Or?
So they're going to be a rent. So we're going to use the same formula for our per square foot rent and have a rental lease agreement for those kiosks.
All right, thanks. Anyone else? All right, good. Thanks, Eric. I guess we can move on to harbor attenuator.
So, as you know, we had a failure on the southwest corner of the South Basin. Went to council probably with a month on the job, asking for over $2 million to replace these things. It's been quite a challenge. The firm the fabricating firm had an operation in St. Pete that after we engaged and started down this path, they had to move to their parent operation in Montreal.
Ooh.
There are 3 wave attenuators on trucks today, probably in Tennessee, Alabama. They were trying to get FDOT permits to get because they're huge. So that through our timing off, we are going to receive them hopefully the first part of next week. And our storage option, because now the contractor can't put them in because of the scheduling problems until December, is our installation date. The storage would be an exorbitant cost, so we will treat them as if they are a 95,000-pound vessel, each one of them, and secure them in 3 of our slips at the harbor marina inside the existing attenuators. So that's the plan. because they're huge, and if you lay them down somewhere or try and rent the truck and leave it on the flatbed, it's tens of thousands of dollars for that storage. So our option was to store them where they're going to ultimately live, and that's in the water at the Harbor Marina. So it's a scheduling nightmare because we have to have push barges, offloading equipment, a big travel lift up in Tarpon Springs, so you have to coordinate the arrival of the trucks, the travel lift availability, and push boats from the contractor. So coordinating three entities and 3 trucks coming from Canada has been an interesting week for all of us, and the engineer is about to lose his mind. We're also looking at 3 attenuators on the South Basin on the north west corner that were damaged for the latest series of storms, so we're working through that as well, design and those types of things. So constant battle down there. It's we have a master maintenance plan that the city had paid for, the Marine and Aviation had contracted. Once we get that in hand and repair these failing segments, we want to, and we budgeted for this starting in '25, a significant amount of money for a maintenance schedule. So my vision for this is in the beginning of 2025, depending on what the master maintenance plan suggests, we replace all pile guides, for instance. And then the next year we replace all the whalers, which is effectively looks like the rub rails around, but they hold them together. So I think once we get through the exigent issues, we'll be able to pursue this master maintenance plan that will effectively allow us to move things forward. The other thing that's going to be interesting with the harbor is those are the attenuator problems, is the opening of the park, and the impact it's going to have down there. I suspect we're going to see a lot more transient bookings for the shows. So it'll be interesting, and I just want to make sure that facility is representative of the city, and it's a big, older, it's 13 years old now facility that's a constant maintenance battle. Bill and his team are out there every day hosing the docks down and trying to stay on top of it. But it's a large facility in an exposed area, so it's showing its age with the corrosion and things like that. But that's what the master maintenance plan is for, to really get on a schedule of maintenance that allows us to stay on top of that thing.
Okay, and the third item was Seminole Docks repairs.
So Seminole Docks, I think I probably showed you this one before, but so the gangway to the floating dock, there was a bunch of concrete spalling and cracking. They put those in about 20 years ago, 23 years ago now. And they're just old and they're worn out. So the gangway pulled away from the concrete, leaving it unsafe. So we had our crews go out and actually remove the floating dock so it's not an attractive nuisance. So the floating dock is gone, it's just the pier and it's closed. So that limits access to 2 of the 8 launch ramps, so you can't launch there. This happened last summer, and then I engaged with engineering, got a conditions survey, and they determined that it's in need of repair and replacement. We started moving that down the tracks. Engineering got a design, they got pricing, we have the budget to cover that, and they submitted applications to FDEP and some of the other county waterways, and FDEP initially said, well, because you're just replacing in kind and doing maintenance, repairs, then you have an exemption. Well, then I guess that changed, and they determined that a permit was necessary, and that changed again. They determined that we may not be able to apply for a permit because there's some discrepancies in the legal description of the property. So we've spent the better part of a month meeting with legal, digging through archives. I found documents from 1967, and the state provided funding to build the original Seminole boat ramps in this configuration. So the state provided us money to do so. We built the original docks in 67, or launch ramps in 67, the parking lot, all of that stuff was covered. I think the total amount was $140,000, and they paid half of it. And I think it was a pass-through grant from the feds is what it looked like. But the state had administered it, and they accepted all of our deeds, titles, legal descriptions, and it exists as it existed then as far as the footprint. They did that again in 2000, and they approved the concrete piers as you see them. They maintained those. They placed the floating docks again in 2000, and that's the last activity at the facility. So now, here we are in 2023, and there's an issue. So we had a meeting last Friday with our legal advisors, engineering team, and legal's going to review the documents and engage with FDEP's general counsel folks to see what the path forward is. I just find it ironic that the state authorized it initially in 67. They contributed money again, and I've got a grant agreement that says I have to maintain those, but now I can't maintain them because another arm of the state says maybe I don't have the authority to do so. So we've got to work through it. It's just going to delay this thing, which I hate because we have progressive failures there, and I've got my fingers crossed, and the crews keep inspecting them to make sure we don't have to decommission another one because of safety issues. So the permitting regulatory component for marine and aviation was not something that I was expecting because of the variety of our facilities and the previous permits issued. But I think what's probably happened is you had documents from the 20s when these deeds were issued and surveys, and now you compare those to today's technology and the GIS systems and GPS mapping and laser measurements, and I think it probably creates these discrepancies between older legal documents and modern surveying techniques. But remains to be seen. We are moving it forward. We had the meeting Friday. Legal is mulling it all over, and it's going to reach out to FDEP and see what our path forward might be, because we have to. It's one of the busiest launch facilities in Pinellas County, and we have to make it safe.
Assuming you can do it at some point in time, when you do it, is there ever a point where you might have to close all the ramps? I mean, obviously, if there's weakness or failures or safety, yes, but does the project call for some point in time for all the ramps?
We wanted to phase it so we would at least leave a couple open while, so we're going to, that was part of the plan, is to phase this thing, knowing the demand out there. And, my hope would be do it in the coldest months of the year, obviously, but it's a timing thing. I mean, we need to do it as quickly as possible, but the permitting thing is going to be a bit of a challenge for us, because we just have to get some certainty on what the issue is and what their concerns are. Engineering met with them previously. I have not met with FDEP. I would suspect that when legal asks for that meeting with them, I'll be there to articulate the kind of history behind this thing, because I suspect, they're compartmentalized just like anybody else. They may not know that the state helped build it in 67. I just don't know. So we just got to get to the bottom of it and proceed with the permitting. So that's holding us up right now. It's frustrating, but it's just the way these things go. That's why I was so excited to get the FDEP permit for the beach.
Right. All right, we'll move to the last item on your agenda, this Stevenson Creek update.
Well, I might as well start where it is, permitting. So we have a contractor ready to do the work. We have the hardware to install. We have the signage, the verbiage for the signage, the ordinance been passed, and we are waiting for a series of permits to move it forward. I was before you previously, and the consultant said about 6 months from that last meeting. I'm hopeful that we're looking at about 4 months left to get the permits done, but we're ready to move and flip the switch on the installation as soon as we get the permits. And again, it's just a process with these things. It's time consuming. And for a guy like me, I'm relatively impatient. It's definitely caused me to reevaluate my patience and try and have more of it, because it's frustrating. You know, you're waiting for these things, and I think the belief early on with this, you know, when it was first contemplated several years ago, was, oh, we'll just put some signs in there. So, you know, I came into marine and aviation a little over a year ago with the same approach. Oh, we can just put some signs in. Not so much. There's a lot of regulatory hurdles to jump through to put anything in the waterways. But, you know, I think it'll be a benefit to that area once we get it established. It's not exactly what we were looking for. I thought we could regulate the whole creek, but it's 300 feet either side of a bridge or obstruction in the narrow waterways. So we'll move that along. I've got a picture of that here somewhere just to show you guys, I think. Maybe this is the latest, and it depicts the zones to be controlled as well as some of the signage. And this is one of the exhibits we sent to the state. So as you can see, the markers would be at location 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And then the zones would be 300 feet aside of each bridge span. And
each
then
bridge.
the
Okay.
whole narrow area depicted in blue would be a slow speed zone. So the next step in the permitting process is my guys have to go out there with GPS and plot the position of each proposed marker, supply that to FWC, and then we can move it along. But we gotta get a super high tide and a very small boat to get in there to get those GPS coordinates where we want to put the markers. So that's about it on Stevenson's Creek. As soon as we get the permits in hand, we're going to move forward, and the installation will take very little time, I suspect. But the contractor's ready to go. We just got to give them the go-ahead.
Is there a real shortage of marine contractors in the area?
You know, anecdotally, I'd say yes, and you know, I only because a lot of folks are working in Southwest Florida. A lot of marinas were destroyed. A lot of private docks were destroyed, and we had the images depicting some of those. You know, whole marinas lifted up over top the pilings, and off they went. So I think there's a lot of work down there. And then once they deploy, I mean, they're deploying slow-moving vessels and things and barges, and it makes more sense to work locally if they're deployed. So they you know.
I installed a lift in Bel Air many years ago, but yeah, there are hurdles and there are time frames that they say, this is when we are going to do it, period.
Yeah.
You know, and unfortunately I was out of town and I wasn't happy with the job in that they got through the shale that was outside the property and kind of hit a sinkhole, so suddenly the posts weren't as tall as they were supposed to. And rather than going and getting one taller pole for that part where it had a hole in it, they cut off all the other ones.
Yeah.
Which put the I-beam, as you leave the dock to go onto the boat, the I-beam for a normal person was right about in the middle of your forehead. Besides the fact that off my dock, which is seawall level, now there's the limit of how high I can put my boat in a storm.
Right.
And I have pictures of the water almost lapping at my back door and this far from lifting my boat off the, 2 more feet of storm surge and my boat is in the water. And I don't own that property anymore, so I don't have nightmares about why didn't I just sue that guy and make him come put new poles in. But you've got to watch every detail of it. And the fact that I wasn't even in the country to control, not that I'm a controlling person, to control the entire project, well, being in construction and marine and area work platform safety and everything that I did in my life, to not have control of it and to come back and immediately walk forehead first into an I-beam,
Yeah.
They're tough to work with. But they are on a time schedule. They have this space where they can be there.
Yeah.
And otherwise, they're slow, as you said, slow-moving vessel is far, far away. Mr. Henderson.
Okay, well, I think we've had the director's report. I don't know if there's any members to be heard. Phil, I didn't know if you had any questions that you want to take care of.
A little small plumbing emergency at my house this morning.
Sorry.
The
Anything
shower
from
went
anyone?
downstairs and had a flood. We're all good.
I had questions coming in, and Mr. Gandy has
Right.
already covered them.
Appreciate everything you told us. Obviously, you have your hands full.
Sure.
Unless Phil, you have something really pressing that you want to get into, I think we're almost done, but I know you
I've always
just
said,
arrived.
but I'll talk to him later.
Okay. All right, then I guess we'll declare the meeting adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Sorry.